Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Gold Goats and Guns podcast. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Wednesday, June 7th, 2017. Oh my. It only gets weirder every day now, doesn't it? So on Monday, I've been so busy I haven't even had a chance to talk about this. So on Monday, we saw the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, begin to eat itself. And it's an interesting twist on something that I've been expecting for a long time now. And we're going to get right to it. And we're going to talk about that and what's looking like a beginning of the end of the rally in gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and a bunch of other stuff. So let's get to it. All right. So Qatar was effectively ousted from the Gulf Cooperation Council on Monday by the Saudis and everybody else. And since oil broke down from $125 a barrel beginning in June of 2014, the overriding concern that I've had is when was the Saudi government going to have to break their peg to the dollar, right? So the Saudi rial is pegged at the dollar. It's somewhere around, 7.7 or something. I can't remember off the top of my head what the number is, but it doesn't matter. It's pegged to the dollar. It's part of the petrodollar system. Because the Saudis maintain a peg to the dollar, they do all their transactions their oil transactions in dollars, and then recycle their excess dollars that they don't need back into U.S. Treasury bonds or other U.S. assets, and weapons, this, that, whatever, right? And stocks, and so that system has been breaking down. The problem is by maintaining a peg when the underlying asset that makes up most of your income, in this case oil, is your revenues drop like a rock. But if your currency free floats versus said currency, i.e. the dollar, if the real were to float openly versus the dollar, then as the value of oil dropped in dollars, the value of oil in reals would stay roughly the same. This is what happened in Russia in 2014 when they stopped fighting. First, they stopped fighting the drop in the price of oil by selling by intervening in the foreign exchange markets by selling dollars in order to raise rubles and all of that. And they in order to defend the current level of the ruble, eventually they said, look, we can't do this. They burned through $100 billion worth of reserves in like a month and a half, and they said, we can't do that. So they stopped and they let the ruble free float. And so the ruble went from about 32 to 80 inside of about 3 weeks versus the dollar. The same thing has to happen to the Saudi rial, or they have to continue to burn through their reserves by spending their accumulated dollars in order to maintain the peg, because they still have to pay the same amount of money to all of their reals, all of their operating costs are in reals, but they're maintaining an overvalued real relative to their income. And so either the real has to drop in price or they have to spend all their savings. And this is exactly what they're doing. And this is why the Saudis have been running a 19% to GDP, the 19% of GDP primary budget deficit for 2.5 years now, or something like that. I think it's maybe down to 17%, but it doesn't matter. It's an enormous amount of money because Saudi GDP is somewhere north of $780 billion. Do the math. It's like $175 to $190 billion a year they're losing. That's a lot of money, even for the Saudis. And so there's a lot of power politics going on behind the scenes of why they are now going after Qatar. And the main reason is that the Qataris are the world's largest exporters of natural gas, an incredibly rich country, the richest country by per capita in the world. The per capita income in Qatar is something like $133,000 a year, and mostly on natural gas exports. And they're rich enough that they can afford effectively their own domestic monetary and foreign policy. Now, the Saudis and Qataris were in cahoots over the Syria project. Hey, let's remake Syria. Let's get rid of the hated Assad and the Baathists in Syria, and then we'll drive an oil and gas pipeline from our two countries into Turkey, into Southern Europe, bypassing the Russians and Gazprom and the whole nine yards. And this is what the Clinton State Department under Obama did. They launched the Syrian civil war for this. And both the Saudis and Qataris were the main, were ISIS's and Al-Qaeda's main benefactors. Saudis mostly backing ISIS and Qataris mostly backing Al-Qaeda in Syria, otherwise known as Jabhat al-Nusra. So, but that's all breaking down. And then Donald Trump comes in 2 weeks ago, reads the Saudis and basically the entire Arab world, the Riot Act, and says, look, you're not going to get any support from the United States at all unless you give up supporting terrorists. And so the Saudis fancy themselves the leaders of the Arab world. And Qatar is pretty much making noises about going their own way. They bought a large stake in Rosneft, the Russian oil company, a couple months ago when the Russians were putting Rosneft up for privatization, to privatize another stake in Rosneft. The Western media was all like, oh, it's not going to go anywhere. No one's going to buy Rosneft from the Russians. And the Qataris stepped up and bought a big stake in Rosneft. Now remember, that Qatar is right across the Persian Gulf from Iran. They have claims to similar oil field, offshore gas fields, not oil fields, or offshore gas fields. There's been noise about Qatar and Iran reaching an agreement about building a pipeline from those fields up through Iran, back into Turkey, and then into Southern Europe in order to, supply gas to Southern Europe along with Gazprom. Saudi Arabia is not happy about this. And many other things. And there's a ton. I could probably go on for half an hour about this issue alone. But this is a massive, massive shift in Middle East politics. And the Saudis are facing an existential threat to their livelihood. Wildcatters out in the Permian Basin, Eagle Ford, and all around the United States are putting huge downward pressure on the price of oil as American production skyrockets. The Russians are, they have a nominal, kind of tacit agreement with the Saudis. Well, we'll limit production a little bit, for the next 9 months or so. Gazprom Neft is pretty much just shutting down legacy fields that aren't producing very much in the first place. And, they're almost completely depreciated assets. That's all they're shutting down. It's not like the Russians are actually shutting down core assets or anything. Because you got to cap those wells. You cap your old wells that aren't producing very much. And that's pretty much all the Russians are committed to. And then we have Turkey this morning in response to all this. Fast track a piece of legislation to expand their presence in Qatar. They have a base there along with the Americans. The Americans have the U.S. CENTCOM is in Qatar with a massive base, which is the base of operations for all of our forward projection from there, into Afghanistan and Iraq, Syria. So this whole thing's a mess, and the potential now for something big to happen from this is very high. And yesterday, last night, the Saudis gave Qatar a 10-point, 24-hour ultimatum. Agree to these 10 points unilaterally in the next 24 hours or be invaded. Now, the Saudis operate a vast but inept military. And a military so inept with American weaponry. They can't even put down the Houthi rebellion in Yemen, one of the poorest nations in the world, with the help of the local government. So the Turks, who have the strongest military in the region, except for Iran, are looking to expand their 600-troop presence. That's approximately, there's somewhere between 300 and 600 troops in Qatar. Now, we have something like 10,000 or upwards of 10,000. But I don't think we're going to see anything happen on our front. I know what we're doing. What's happening here is that since Trump made that speech and made whatever deals that he made with the Saudis, the pressure is being stepped up on Iran and all of the Saudis' enemies, thinking, well, the Americans are back corner now. Israel and we and Israel are together in an alliance, effectively in an alliance. We haven't opened up a diplomatic relationship, but for all intents and purposes, we have. This is the situation, and now what? So we can go on the rampage. This is Mohammed bin Salman, who Putin's had to smack down a couple of times for his ambitions. We think President Erdogan in And Turkey has imperial ambitions. So then we have an Iraq, a terrorist attack on the Iranian parliament yesterday. Apparently, just to add more fuel to this, Qatar opened up a yuan clearing center for buying LNG from Qatar in yuan. Them's fighting words as far as we're concerned. The Gulf Cooperation Council exists to enforce the petrodollar standard. And you know that Trump is America first. Well, America first means the petrodollar for as long as possible, because we can't have that. We'll allow the world to get off the petrodollar standard in our own time and in ways that it is most advantageous to us. So I'm confused now as to I'm not really confused about what Donald Trump's goals are, because it's very obvious that he's not saying no to any of this, and this has to be part of the plan. Now, what this is going to wind up affecting, what's the eventual outcome of this, is going to be very interesting. And at the same time, then the Americans turn around and bomb the Syrian Arab army near the Jordanian border, saying, "Oh, that's as far as you go. You don't get to come any farther in your own territory." And then said that the Russians agreed to this, which the Russians have flatly denied. And we now have that coalition, Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, Russia, saying, if you bomb the Syrian army one more time, we're coming for you. Now this is Iran, Russia, and the United States playing a game of chicken in southern Syria. Now I've been on record as saying that I think that the whole plan here has been for Putin and Trump to lay groundwork for a grand bargain in the Middle East. But I don't know. Events of this week don't quite fit that scenario unless Trump is going to really push the Russians to their breaking point. Because this is looking to me more and more like the Americans are not agreement capable in Russian terms. There's a Russian term for it that they use all the time to describe the Americans. And if Russia and the United States made a deal behind the scenes about all this, this doesn't scan for me. I'm not saying that. Look, at the end of the day, Qatar has to give up their support of the Muslim Brotherhood and Jabhat al-Nusra and all of this. And frankly, they're making overtures to Russia and Iran. Tell you that they're probably ready to do that. And with the collapse of al-Nusra, with the collapse of ISIS, it's obvious the Saudis have given up their support of ISIS in Syria. And it's beginning to become really obvious that that's the same thing is happening in the western part of Syria where Al-Qaeda is, in Idlib. So now what? Turkey's taking sides. And this, so the next 2 or 3 days are going to be and this is all happening when tomorrow we've got the ECB policy meeting. James Comey is going to take the stand and testify against Donald Trump. And the British are holding a snap parliamentary elections, all on the same day. Noises out of the ECB had the euro all over the place this morning. And very interestingly, the euro has steadfastly refused to even approach $1.13. 5 days now in a row, 5 trading days in a row, the euro has attempted to breach $1.13 and has failed miserably. And today it finally started to break down. And gold backed off after it reached resistance at $12.97, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And silver backed off. And now Bitcoin is even beginning to back off. Meaning, if this stuff is real between all of these guys, if this stuff is real, and we may have the outbreak of something ugly on the Arabian Peninsula, which, by the way, does not bode well for the Saudis, then now what? Do you really think that the dollar is going to continue to drop like a rock, like all of these, frankly, amateurish gold analysts are talking about? Do you really think that capital is going to flee the American markets under this kind of chaos? I mean, if you do, then, I have really nice bridge work in Brooklyn I want to sell you. I'm serious. It's asinine. The dollar has gone through a small correction, but everybody's offside now. Oh, and we had a bank blow up in Spain that had to be bailed in last night. It was sold to Santander for $1. Banco Popular was sold for $1 last night. Depositors bailed in because the ECB took unilateral action again about this. First bank on the continent of Europe to be bailed in. Last time they did this was Cyprus. Now they were able to get away with it in Cyprus because most of the money was Russian oligarch money. Let's get to the charts. All right, so here we are with gold. I told you that 1297.40 was kind of an important level. Oh, look. Yesterday's high was right around 1297.50. Today we have an inside bar. Today's interesting because now we have an inside bar. Now, inside bars aren't always reversal signals, right? Here we had a big breakout, and then we had two really tight inside. We had an inside bar here, and then we had a small bar, but they were both well within inside. It took 3 days to get outside of this big bar here. That's fine. It traded sideways. And, I would have been worried here, right, of a potential reversal. Once we didn't get anything, then obviously it was going to continue to push higher. Another inside bar here. Got a big bar, then it came down, but we had this nice big long tail here, put us in the upper half of this bar, so that lowers the probability that we're going to get something ugly. We did get something ugly that morning, and then boom, we got this big, huge engulfing bar. But look at that pattern, right? This is what's called a bullhorn pattern. Not that I'm a huge fan of those things, but this kind of thing is really indicative of a market that wants to do something radical. Well, look, 3 days later, we're $20 higher, pushing up towards resistance, but I don't see any follow through from here. Now, this isn't a big deal, but if you are interested in trying to hedge any long gold positions that you may have, this would be one of those days where you could take a speculative position, saying, okay, well, I'll buy a position in something like Dust or go short, buy some put options or whatever right here. Around $1,300, say GLD put options, and have the opportunity then to hedge, a potential correction here if the dollar is actually going to get off the mat. We're less than a week away from the FOMC meeting. Tomorrow is the ECB. If the ECB does not, the ECB gives you any kind of hawkish tone tomorrow, the euro is going back to $1.11. If the exit polls coming out of Britain are weird, are out of the ordinary, we're going to see a drop in the pound. I think the pound's too strong now anyway. I think the traders have overpledged their hands about a strong euro giving Theresa May negotiating power within Brexit. Nonsense. A weaker euro gives them a weaker pound gives them negotiating power, because that's just asking for capital inflow at the expense of the European Union, who is attempting to erect protection barriers everywhere and telling members that if you don't accept refugees, get the hell out. Well, Poland's like, okay, and we won't let the door hit us on the ass on our way out. Well, on our way out. Same thing with Hungary. I think Viktor Orban would take the Hungarians out of the EU tomorrow if he thought he could get away with it. So this inside bar here, after this massive run-up, and we're at resistance, this may be your signal. But I would if you're going to take a short gold position, keep your stop tight. Somewhere around 1305, 1306, gold pushes above 1300, and for any more than an hour or two, boom, get out. Cut it off. Put it on later. Take the loss. Take the wash sell loss. Don't worry about it. Okay? So, but I think there's a potential reversal coming here in gold. I think the same thing is setting up. This is a daily chart of gold. I never put the daily chart up. I always put weekly or monthly chart up. So looking at the weekly chart of silver, we had high probability of breakthrough to the upside this week on silver, but we're halfway through now. We haven't moved. We haven't even approached $18 yet. Again, the probability of a 5-week uptrend in silver is pretty low. They usually don't last this long. You can see them right here. But this is only some of the data. I've got data going back 6 years. There's only 4 times we've had a 5-week uptrend in silver. So it just doesn't usually work out that way. And this is technically a 9-week uptrend. If it wasn't for this bar is practically a bullish bar. This is a 9-week uptrend. This is really rare, right? So I just don't see this. I just see that we're getting to that point now where capital flight out of the dollar is beginning to abate. Now let's look at Bitcoin. Same thing here. Now this is interesting. I just tend to want to look purely at the bars and not draw a chart, not draw the patterns or anything like that on this, because it's an easy way to get yourself into serious trouble. But look at this. This is your, generally speaking, bull markets have 3, maybe 4 impulses in them. I'm not saying that Bitcoin's bull market is over, because this is a daily chart. Okay, so in this particular 2-month time frame, you got 1 up. There's an up wave right here, and then 2, and then 3. Look how ugly this is, and then 4. Bitcoin closes below 2690 today. This is on which exchange was this quoted off of? I'm sorry, I thought I grabbed the exchange. I can't remember because investing.com has most of them. Doesn't have not Poloniex, but one of the other major ones. Closes on below 2690 on honestly 2650 or so. Forget it. That's a reversal bar. We're gonna get a move back into the 2500s. We can see it in the Bitcoin to other the other currency, the other cryptocurrency pairs relative to Bitcoin. We can see it in Ethereum. We can see it in Ethereum is still pushing stronger up against Bitcoin, but all the other ones, all the marginal coins, are all contracting. They're all retreating faster than Bitcoin is. It's a good sign that money's beginning to flow out. People are taking profits left and right. So we may get a 3 or 4 or even 5-day correction in Bitcoin at this point. And if so, it could easily correct back down into I would say probably into this level, in the 2300 level. This 2350 area was your 5 days worth of resistance to the upside. Then we broke out higher. I would say that's your likely test of support. At 1850 down here, about 2350, that we could easily see then 3000 after that. I'm not saying that Bitcoin's done in the long run. I'm just saying that right now, very good, very strong possibility through the weekend and into early next week, we may have another correction in Bitcoin. And this is going to happen on a regular basis going forward. Every couple of weeks, we're going to have a big bull move up, and more importantly, it's going to get even noisier. The charts are going to get noisier. They're not going to be nearly as structured as this one is. It's going to be they're just going to get insane. Okay? So, and if Cliff High's analysis is correct, and we're looking at, $13,000 to $14,000 Bitcoin by February, you have to ask yourself what's going on in the gold markets, what's going on in the silver markets, what's going on in the euro markets, what's going on in the dollar markets. Okay? We're still seeing a strong bid under stocks. We're seeing a strong bid under U.S. Treasuries. So it's still, everything is still, everybody wins except the dollar until tomorrow, possibly. All right. So these are the things I want you to watch out for, especially given the backdrop that we have effectively war breaking out in the Arab world. Certainly financial war. And now diplomatic war. Now, whether or not it turns into a hot war, I think is up to Turkey at this point. All right? Well, that's what I got for today, guys. We'll probably get back together on Saturday morning. I'll probably do one for a market close on Saturday. We'll have a little bit more clarity on what's going on with Brexit, what's going on with the ECB, and get us prepped for next week's FOMC meeting. So y'all have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you soon. Keep your stick on the ice.